Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. When I think about it, back in 2013 when I started this series, and I was only planning on making 25 videos, then I went to 50 videos. And this series will be Series 106, Part 1. And I was planning on each book or books by certain authors to keep them in a certain series. In this case, 106 and 105, the Encyclopaedia Judaica, as you can see right here, I have 13 of the 16 books so far, and I have determined that there's no way to keep it in one series. I'm up to video number 7, part 7, on 105, the Judaica Encyclopedia, on the topic Kabbalah, and I have more to go. So the topic for 106 will be the United States of America dash anti-Semitism, the history of the Jewish people in the United States. So I can see that there'll be plenty of the series 105, 106, maybe 108, 110, 120, 130. There'll be many series made out of these volumes. There is that much. It's an encyclopedia set. It's endless what's in here. This is 2 feet high. You can't pick it up. And then when I get the other 3, it'll be up to here. And topics, Freemasons, Rothschilds. It's endless. The history of the Jewish culture, the Jewish people, Israel, published in 1971, so I would be venture to say that prior to that, this much information on the Jewish people worldwide has never been put in print like this. Now with that said, I've also come to an interesting conclusion, and I need to have this little disclaimer up front on this video. What I read about, what's in these books, and share in my videos is not necessarily the truth. Remember, in Israel, in 1971, when this was first released, 2 editions were published, one in New York City and one in Israel. This is the Macmillan edition published in Israel. The McDowell edition, I believe, was published in New York City. So when these people made this encyclopedia set about the Jewish people, thousands of years, they made it into what they want the world to know and to think. So it doesn't have to be, it is not the truth. And when I say that, I want to make a point. This is Series 106. So that means I've made a lot of videos before this one. And I estimate that I have about 400 hours on YouTube of my videos made. And I have several sheets here. That's one sheet. Another sheet. And I got the video numbers and the name of the book and the author, and the numbers of videos I made from each book, as you can see the numbers there. So I would like to think that I have accumulated a bit of knowledge up here. So when I read the volume here, this top one, quite heavy book, from S to U, you can see it says Encyclopaedia Judaica. and the Macmillan edition. This was a library, ex-library book. So they did update these encyclopedia sets and apparently sold off the old ones, which I believe are invaluable. But remember, what they wrote in these books is what their side of the story is. Another side of the story are these books that I've read since 2005, and some before, but when I really started my investigation. So I've read from all these many bestsellers, world-famous authors. Things like, on this page here, Bloody Zion, Edward Hendry, Secret Societies and Subversive Movements, Nesta Webster, The Dearborn Independent by Henry Ford, the automaker, his books when he bought a newspaper. The Bible, I've been reading from the Bible and made 4 videos or more, and I plan on doing more videos on the Bible. The Black Sun, Peter Moon, Transylvania, Peter Moon, Ruda Sinamar, the Montauk Project, the end of Long Island where they were abducting boys and performing all kinds of experiments, time travel, time portals, Philadelphia Experiment, the ship that disappeared and reappeared elsewhere, Invisible Horizons, stories about ghosts at sea, flying saucers at sea, ships underwater at sea, for hundreds of years. Blue Blood, True Blood, Stuart Swervelo, lots of interesting details about these things in his books. The Case for UFOs, Morris Jessup. So my point is, I can keep on going here. The Occult and the Third Reich, the Encyclopedia of the Psychic World, the Holocaust Dogma and Judaism by Ben Wittrop, Holy Serpents and the Jews by Tex Mars, Masonry Conspiracy Against Christianity by Ralph Epperson, A Separate Reality by Carlos Castienda, who went down there in Mexico, coming from California, and lived with this Shama, this old man, for quite a while, and learned what it was like to take the drugs, peyote, and other kind of things like mushrooms to go into a trance and actually see this other world. The New World Order by Ralph Epperson, The International Jew, again by Henry Ford, The Reappearance of the Christ by Alice Bailey. That's only one sheet. I've got 4 sheets here of these books. Karma, Annie Besant, Isis Unveiled, H.P. Blavatsky. The Lost Book of Enki, Zachariah Stitchin, Planet X Forecast by Marshall Masters, None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, Gary Allen, and of course we're at the Encyclopaedia Judaica. I've made 7 videos, about 10 hours or more, and this is 106 on the top book here. And again, it's the United States and anti-Semitism, Jewish activities and history in the United States. So my point with this opening on this video, when I read from this, I can obviously, from all these books that I have read, and hundreds, if not thousands of videos, hundreds of magazines, 10,000 or more press releases, serious research in 2005. So what is this? 2017? Going on my 13th year. I believe up here I have some view, and so does a lot of the world right now, about the New World Order and the New Age and the satanic symbolism all over the TV programming and even on major sports symbols and American Idol and Eurovision, the European version of American Idol, where the singer back in 2014, the winner was Conchita Wurst, who had the head like Jesus and the body of a woman in a silky dress, singing the song Phoenix Rising, which has the words, "You Can't Stop Us." So when I read this history written by the people over there in Israel, and you think about this weirdness going on in the world, and what I have learned So when I'm reading this, I'm going to say that I either agree or disagree what's published in this book, with the background that I have. That's what I wanted to say before I started going into this highlighted material when I read in this encyclopedia on the United States of America, the Jewish history and anti-Semitism. The history has been rewritten. Joe Biden was just over in Switzerland. He's getting ready to leave the White House with Obama, and Donald Trump's coming in. And he said that Putin from Russia and a lot of people like Donald Trump here in the United States want to stop the international order. I was reading that today and watching a video. He didn't say New World Order. They keep playing with these words, just like they do in these books. They call it an international order, and the progressive, liberal, forward movement will not be stopped. These people will not allow this New World Order to be stopped. And that should concern us all, because they plan on bringing us World War III. They plan on bringing some gigantic calamity to the planet to have a worldwide martial law, in my opinion, and so many others. Then we have all this reference to satanic rituals of men, women, and children either being tortured, satanic rape and assault, and apparently men, women, and children being satanic rituals of sacrifice. So torture, sexual aggression, and death, sacrifice, part of the stuff that's in the Bible, the stuff that's been going on for a long time. The TV program is off the chart. I was watching another issue or series on the Gotham series after not watching it for 6 months because it just made me sick, ill, to watch those shows. But because I make videos, I like to check in once in a while and see how it's going. And I could not make it, and a friend of mine was watching it with me. And she walked away, said she couldn't watch it. I made it a few more minutes before I turned it off, and I came to the conclusion that there are people all across America watching that brutality and viciousness on TV and in the movies. And we see it with all this other craziness in the world, and with Joe Biden over in Switzerland talking about that they will not allow the progressive liberal plans to be stopped. So with that said, I'll read some of this and get the background that I'm not without a little bit of work here. I've been doing this for quite a few years, making videos, read these hundreds of books, watched hundreds, thousands of videos, press releases, magazines, Nexus magazine, so many of them. So let me start reading from the book. Alright, so I'm going to start reading from the Encyclopaedia Judaica, Volume 15, SU to UN. So I guess that would have the United States in it. It's a big, heavy book. It's not going to be easy to do this video and hold this for so long. And as I said earlier, this is their point of view, their information. So they're the people who wrote it over there in Israel are not doing it for the benefit of the world. I don't think they intended these publications for people who were non-Jews, for non-Jews scrutiny. Now with that said, with my intuitive mind, and I did use my pendulum, learning how to determine, ask the higher power how much of the material is correct or incorrect. Not that I say anybody should believe that, but apparently when I was making the videos in Series 105, according to my intuitive ability in using the pendulum, almost 80%, 76, 78% of the information on the Kabbalah was false. It was propaganda. So that means almost 20% was true. Now, Now, that's interesting, because remember, they created this encyclopedia set back in 1971. The first time such information has been translated into English and published for the world. So 20% or more, plus or minus, of the Kabbalah info seems to be the truth about reality. They didn't want to put in here that the Kabbalists and the occultists were practicing witchcraft and sorcery and working for kings and queens and for their own personal power and money and other perverted goals for themselves. So plus or minus 20% was true. So on the United States of America, anti-Semitism in the United States, about almost 80% of the information is true, according to my intuitive ability and the pendulum. Again, you can believe what you want to. I'm just reporting that certain amounts of the different topics in these books are more or less more of its propaganda or some of its truth, but some of the truth they're using for their own gain. Well, I know I'm making a lot of disclaimers in this video. So on the USA, anti-Semitism in America, about 80% of the information seems to be true information. 20% deception. They don't want to tell the whole truth. And why would they? I mean, certain peoples of the Zionist, Kabbalistic Jewish culture, not all Jewish people, many Jewish people have stayed with God and have tried to warn the rest of us, like Henry Mackay, PhD, Canadian author who wrote the book Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. So the Illuminati would be of the secret societies, the cults of the Kabbalists. On those videos, which it's said in there that they want to keep that stuff secret, and only that information would be divulged to certain selected individuals who would be illumined, which is called esoteric teachings. The occult, which is also another way of saying witchcraft or sorcery, magicians, and not necessarily like when Jesus used his knowledge and his power to heal people, to see into the future, to prophesize things that were going to happen, and to cast out demons and spirits and all these other things. Obviously, those powers of the spiritual realm can be used for good, but when it's used for bad, like in the New Age and the New World Order, I like to call it witchcraft, so people can understand clearly. So I'm going to start reading this and just saying, like I said earlier, I'll have to continue to repeat myself, but maybe 20% of the information on the Kabbalah topic out of those 7 videos, 10 hours or more, was true. 80% of it was misleading propaganda, painting this topic in a positive light. And then, of course, on this here, about 80% of it, just the opposite appears to be true. But apparently some of it's deceptive. They don't want the real truth, and they're omitting a lot of things. So keep that in our mind when I'm reading. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I am anti, as Joe Biden just said in Switzerland the other day, this is January 2017, that Putin of Russia and Trump here in America and the other people who were anti-New World Order and anti-New Age, which they're changing the word, Joe Biden, Vice President, he called it the International Order. So I love how they play with words, and that Putin and Trump are opposed to the progress of the progressives and the liberals. And so what is the progressives and the liberals? And is it all this propaganda that they're doing to try to make everybody join some kind of world that apparently has some sustainability problems, global warming issues, which was in the news today, saying this is the 3rd year. This was on the Washington Post. I saw this in my email today, a press release. I don't know why the Washington Post sends them to me. But anyways, apparently this is the third year in a row, 2016, that just passed. The hottest year, 3 years in a row. But it failed to mention the intense sky spraying of chemicals in the sky and the use of high technologies like HARP transmitters, microwave and sonic weapons to actually alter the jet stream. So when you tell one side of the story and not the other, I call that deception and propaganda, which is also in this topic that I'm going to start reading from. Page 1647, and just to show you what I highlighted here, this heavy book. So it's the topic, United States of America. I've got a lot more to read. This is part 1 of 2006 series in Freemasonry and Satanism. And again, I continue to remind myself, I'm amazed I named it that title because it seems to be appropriate. Something's going on here with the Freemasons' creation of the Zionist, Kabbalistic, Illuminati Jewish culture, which does not include all Jewish people. Many Jewish people are trying to warn the rest of us, even Rabbi Marvin Antelman in his 2 books, to eliminate the opate. The opate would be your and my belief in God and our desire to pray and do as God says so that God will act in our lives. They don't want that. When I say they, I'm talking about the progressives and the liberals, and not all people who think that they're progressives and liberals are in on it. They don't know about the higher agenda. Just like the Freemasons, the general membership, they don't know what's really going on at the top of the pyramid. So, okay, here. 1648 page. Anti-Semitism in the United States. In 1811, Rabbi Gershom Mendes is another name for the devil, by the way, Saxius of New York wrote that the United States is perhaps the only place where the Jews have not suffered persecution. In 1811, Rabbi Gershom Mendes, the United States is perhaps, this is 1811, the only place where the Jews have not suffered persecution, but have, on the contrary, been encouraged and indulged in every right of citizens. And I think that is great. But what did the Jewish people do with their freedoms here in America to do whatever they wanted to? Did they use that for the advantage of the country, or were they working towards Zionist gains? As I read on, you will see. While it is true that America, anti-Semitism never attained the virulence and baneful consequences of European anti-Semitism, it is equally clear that an undercurrent of anti-Jewish prejudice, sometimes open and more often subtle, has existed throughout the history of the United States. So he's talking a two-faced thing there. One, have not suffered persecution, but have on the contrary been encouraged and indulged in every right of citizenry. But then he moves on to say, of course, undercurrent of anti-Jewish prejudice. Why would people have an undercurrent of that? Unless there was a cause. I mean, you don't hire a pest control company to come spray your house for ants or roaches unless you have ants or roaches. So why would there be undercurrents of anti-Jewish prejudice unless some people were seeing things that they disagreed with? Just saying. Colonial period Civil War. The early colonial settlers in America brought with them the old stereotype of the Jews as the mysterious outsider, heretic and despoiler. So they called these Jews over there, they had this idea, the early colonial settlers, as the Jews as despoilers, heretics, and mysterious outsiders. These prejudices, however, were rarely translated into direct anti-Jewish actions. So here in America, the land of the free, They didn't treat the Jewish settlers poorly. Of course, we all know what happened to the American Indians. They didn't fare so well. Who was running the show? It wasn't me or you, the average citizen out there working. But the people at the top, the people I think that are secret powers behind the scenes of the world, from what I'm seeing in my research, for thousands of years. There have been these despoilers, I want to call them, people who have caused wars between countries all over Europe before America was even discovered. And I learned a lot about that in John Robinson's book, Dungeon, Fire, and Sword. You can go watch my video. And from 1000 to 1300, 300 years, 8 crusades from the Vatican and all the kings and queen of England marched off towards Jerusalem and across Turkey and Greece and Bosnia along the northern coast of the Mediterranean. Pillaged and raped and murdered along the way for supplies and entertainment, I guess. And then from the top of the land of Canaan, called Palestine, now called Israel since 1946, raped and murdered and killed everybody along the whole coast 8 times in 300 years. And apparently the Phoenicians or Jewish folks were generally the tax collectors or the procurers of supplies and advisors to kings and queen of the Vatican to make these wars possible. As we already know, the World War I, World War II, and all the other wars, the banksters are behind the scenes, these Zionist Illuminati types, secret societies, making huge profits on these wars. And I say that seriously because it does look like they're trying to get World War III going, depopulate the planet and some other nefarious activities. So hence I read these books and this material and make these videos. Maybe if we all wake up on all sides, none of this murder needs to continue, and theft and torture and chaos and anarchy. Overruled by the Dutch West India Company. So apparently the very first Jewish settlers in New Amsterdam in 1654 did face an immediate threat by Peter Stuyvesant. The Dutch governor attempted to expel them here in America, but apparently this was overruled by the Dutch West India Company, which appeared to be a nefarious company involved in all kinds of things, including drugs and maybe slavery and all that. Dutch West India Company was forced to grant them the right of residency, and by 1657 they were granted the status of burghers. There's a motorcycle. Nevertheless, the Jews remained, in effect, second-class burghers, even after the British took control of New York. Although economic rights were secured by the end of the 17th century, the 1600s, political rights were not fully granted throughout the colonial period. So even some of this, the problems the Jews had over in Europe carried over into the United States back then. So apparently this problem has been going on quite a while, and then hence we've gone over Henry Ford's books when he bought the Dearborn Independent on the Jewish problem. And anybody, I guess even the Jewish people and even these books admit the Jewish problem and the persecutions and the problems going back to 1600s in the United States when it was being populated. Still, each colony had an established church, and consequently Jews, Catholics, and Protestant dissenters were all subject to discrimination. So not only were the Jewish people subject to discrimination, Jews, Catholics, and Protestant dissenters, anybody who weren't positive with Protestantism, were subject to discrimination. So the Protestant Christians were powerful in the beginnings of the United States of America. So Catholics, Jews, and Protestant dissenters were all subject to discrimination. In no colony, however, were Jews physically harmed for religious motives, as were Quakers and Baptists, and no 18th century law was enacted for the sole purpose of disabling Jews. Colonial American Jewry achieved a considerable degree of economic success, social integration, and intermarriage was frequent by mid-18th century. Well, I don't know about then, but I do know now that intermarriage between Jews and non-Jews is harshly looked upon, and apparently with this program called Aliyah, the return of Jews from all over the world to Israel right now for the last 100 years, they don't look kindly on intermarriage Jewry, Jewish people. And from my research, including reading the Jerusalem Post and many of my other videos, they even want to send their children to special schools and colleges. And even when they go to regular public schools or colleges, they really don't want their children commingling with non-Jews. So there is this separation, and if you're not a Jew, you're not going to immigrate to Israel today. So they want the whole world to be become a melting pot of everything except for Israel today. So where's the racism there? Racism would be in Israel, and they want everybody else to suffer the consequences of an unrelenting immigration of people they're trying to displace from other places, while they're shipping all the jobs from the US and Europe over to China and India. So it just compounds the problem if you think about it. And who's in charge of the world and owning most of the resources? But the less than 1% they talk about, which are these Illuminati elite types, generally speaking, Jewish people, not all Jewish people. So just, and apparently they're very aggressive in their acquirement of most of the world's resources. A lot of deception. The 1840s and 1850s saw a fairly large immigration of German Jews, but by 1860 there were still fewer than 200,000 Jews in a population of 30 million other people in the United States of America. So even in the 1840s, there was a fairly large immigration of German Jews into the United States. And it does, and even in this stuff I'm going to read, these Jewish people do have a disproportionate amount of control and of the government and private businesses, many of which were obtained ruthlessly, which was gone over in many books, including Henry Ford Sr., the automaker, the Dearborn Independent, the books I've been going over. The Know-Nothing movement of the 1850s, I'm not so sure what the Know-Nothing movement was, and other nativist phenomenon of the pre-Civil War era concentrated on their on Catholics and not Jews. So I can say that even in the Freemasonic literature and all the stuff going on today, where we see the menorah on the storefronts during Christmas, the 7 candlestick thing that I've gone over in some videos, and we'll go over further so we can understand it, the holidays that they represent. But we notice that the cross or the manger or even the words Merry Christmas are disappearing, but the menorah is appearing. It's food for thought, stuff that's prophesized. A Federalist in New York condemned the local Democratic Republican Society by saying that they all seem to be of the tribe of Shylock. So Shylock, S-H-Y-L-O-C-K. I've never really heard that term, but I suppose it's people who are sneaky and conniving and money lending, and apparently it's in this book on anti-Semitism. So these attitudes have been around a long time. I didn't start this, and I am not anti-anybody. I am anti-Satanism, Luciferic, New Age, New World Order, which is all prophesized that these things would happen. This is nothing new. That the apocalypse they're saying is going to happen, and a new world order and the new age is coming, and a big event. And we've already seen World War I, World War II were prearranged behind the scenes, and the deception upon America. I wish America would wake up and look into this and watch my videos and look into other material. But they scammed to create these wars. And lots of people like me and other people who work their entire life in families, non-Jewish people and non-elitist Illuminati, non-secret society types, just us regular working people, were robbed of all of our wealth and resources so many times you can't count in the last 2,000-3,000 years. And if we don't wake up and think, it's happening now, but it's going to happen again on a huge level. In 1820, the editor of a prominent magazine, the Niles Weekly Register, wrote that the Jews created nothing and act as if they had a home nowhere. So this is back in 1820. This was written, so this is certainly way before my time. So we wonder why, for these hundreds of years, we're having these problems and these things are written. Jews were concerned also with the questions of church-state relations, including the vexing problem of public school education. So this is on page 1648. So as I said earlier, they didn't want to be integrated into our society. It says it right here. Jews were concerned also with questions of church-state relations, including the vexing problem of public school education. And of course with the Freemasons and the New Age magazine published by the Freemasons, which if you read the Freemasons handbooks and other books, is all this Theophist Society stuff, Kabbalistic stuff, and the rebuilding the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, all this concealed truth of what's going on. Civil War period and thereafter. The first substantial, open anti-Semitic agitation in the United States was evidenced during the Civil War 1861 to 65. So then I'm thinking, if these people, and not all Jewish people, and these secret societies, and not all people on the lower level of these societies, but all these elites and whoever they are who have secret knowledges, advanced technologies for hundreds or thousands of years that they've kept from the rest of us. I believe the Civil War in the United States between the North and the South was just another orchestrated event. And I say that with conviction and concern, because it looks like, if you go look up on the computer, they are now talking about something called Civil War II. And it does seem that over there in Switzerland, what Joe Biden's doing his speech, that it is these progressives and liberals against the rest of us. And if you go out on the streets, you will see a lot of our society is fairly equally divided on this issue, like the elections are always neck and neck. And so I think that's the premise. They will create this new Civil War II. And of course, these elites we're talking about here will be at the top, not involved in this dire event. They will be the puppet masters, and they will watch masses of amounts of people being slaughtered, and they will have obtained all those people's property and wealth and depopulate the planet for the growth of their own kind. Again, we're talking things like movies like Hunger Games and Divergent and a lot of other programming and evidenced material that they're showing us what they're planning to do. So reading this stuff here is just a little revealing if you want to think about what you're reading. So the Civil War in 1861-65, open Semitic agitation in the United States was evidenced during the Civil War. And I think it was a big struggle to take away wealth and power against people who were not of these secret societies, this Kabbalistic culture, which was the culture of the Jews throughout history, according to my previous videos reading on the Kabbalah in the Encyclopaedia Judaica. Alright, continuing on. The economic dislocations and frayed tempers of this critical period, the Civil War, released prejudices that had slumbered below the surface. Think about this. Albert Pike was a general for the South during the Civil War, who wrote Morals and Dogma, who also wrote to his friend Mazzini in Italy that 3 world wars would be required to bring about the New World and the New Age, the New World Order. So clearly, this involves the Freemasonic lodges, which are clearly sub-organizations of these Illuminati cults, Kabbalistic cults, which is part of the Jewish culture, running the United States even back then, as we have seen. And they were certainly big players in world events, and certainly the Civil War was orchestrated. And like I said, a lot of decent people lost all their wealth, properties, and family members, and depopulated the area. So this technique of creating these wars to destroy we people that are not part of these secret societies, organizations, is a old and tried technique that they do. And they're doing it now. Even with Joe Biden's speech in Switzerland recently, last few days, this is January 2017, clearly saying that Putin and Trump are against the international world order, against progressive and liberalism. So what is the progressiveness and liberalism? And it appears to be anti-Christianity and anti-religion and anti-any kind of morality, opening the door to huge pedophilia and other pansexuality and so much more chaos and anarchy and sickness they're trying to promote in humanity. And how long has this been going on? Most people will say, Rick, it's been going on forever. And I'll agree. But at some point, it may become even more critical. And that a point seems to be looming. Both in the North and the South, Jews were accused by some newspapers and political leaders of aiding the enemy, smuggling, profiteering, draft dodging, and speculating. Well, who would have thunk of that? Guess you can't talk about the truth in times like these. Truth is treason. They'll arrest you for truth when these really sick people take over the governments. All right, moving on here. My arm's getting tired holding this huge, heavy book, and the wind is becoming my enemy, trying to turn the pages. Among the prominent figures who displayed anti-Semitic tendencies were General William Sherman and Benjamin Butler, Parsons, William Brownlow, Congressman Henry Foote, Senator Henry Wilson. The major anti-Semitic incident of the war between the North and the South originated with General Ulysses S. Grant. Wow. In what had been called the most sweeping anti-Jewish regulation of all American history. So back during the Civil War, obviously there were a problem with these people of Jewish persuasion, and not all Jews, I keep saying. A lot of good Jews have been trying to warn us about these Jews have turned towards Satanism versus towards God and Jesus. Anti-Jewish regulation in all American history. Grant, in his General Order number 11, December 17, 1862, ordered the expulsion of all Jews as a class within 24 hours from the Department of the Tennessee, comprising parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi. However, President Abraham Lincoln directed the revocation of Grant's order. So Abraham Lincoln directed the revocation of Grant's order to have all of the Jewish people expelled from the Tennessee territory. Back then they probably weren't states, which included everywhere from Kentucky to Mississippi. back during the Civil War, and I have to ask, fairly I believe, why? I wasn't around. I don't even think my grandfather was around back in that territory. The unpleasant episodes, as it says in this book, of the Civil War years should not obscure the fact that the Jews of the United States were perhaps freer than Jews had ever been since their dispersion from Palestine. So apparently years and years ago the Jews were expelled from Palestine. We all know that. And again, I ask, why were they expelled from Palestine? Is the whole world wrong, and only these people who were expelled from the Palestine and dispersed all over the world, were they the only ones who were right? And everywhere they went, they wore out their welcome. And why? What manipulative things were going on in some people's minds who were into these secret society and these occults like witchcraft and the Illuminati and Kabbalah practices when they were accused, like my last videos, of practicing sorcery? What kind of intelligence were operating behind the scenes? Were there really some things like the reptilians, gray aliens, or things in the Bible called watchers, angels cast out of heaven, the Nephilim, these other beings from Earth who mated with the Earth women and created odd or different types of beings, hybrid humans? And of course this did not involve all Jewish people, and it did involve other people, which is another interesting thing to ponder. You know, not that this is a question I think that's fair to ask, but when you say you are Jewish, are you a race of people? If I were to say I was Jewish, am I of a certain race of people? And the answer is no, because there are Jewish people over in Japan, and there are people that are from Africa who are so-called Jewish, the Ethiopians, and there are people all over the world who are non-Hebrew descent from the original Hebrews that Moses escorted out of slavery from Egypt. So they're not a race. And DNA, and you can look this up on your internet, it's already said that. So they're not a race. So are they a religion? And of course the answer is no there, because there are Jewish people who are Christians. There are Jewish people by descent who are atheists, who believe in no God. There are Jewish people who are Jewish, who believe fervently in their religion. And that's not one religion either. There is the Orthodox Jewish people who believe in the Old Testament and God and Moses coming down with the 2 tablets, like this heavy book, and says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not covet what other people want, thou shalt not bear false witness. That's 6 through 10 on the 2nd tablet. So there's one group of Jewish people who want to stick with God, like when Jesus came, us Christians want to stick with God. Now, there was a bunch of other Jewish people who didn't like those commandments. It interfered with their profiteering and other selfish goals and perverted desires, sexual, everything from torturing people with their occultic, satanic rituals. This is all documented in my previous videos and other people's materials and stuff in these encyclopedias. You'll see it. I've been looking at it, and I've been blown away by what I've been finding in these books. But they turn away from God. They become Reformed Jewry, or they go towards Satanism and the Lucifer philosophy, anti-God. And it's part of this prophecy of this Antichrist that's coming. So you can't really be anti-Semitism, which I don't think all Jews are Semites anyways. Most of them are not. Middle Eastern. So then what are we really anti? If you're on the one side of the fence, according to Joe Biden in his speech in Switzerland the other day, that it is half the world, Putin and his people and Donald Trump and all the people who elected him, the anti-progressive, anti-liberal, the conservatives, who want to stick with God and continue with morality. And of course, not all the conservatives have proven themselves to be on that side of the fence. And not all the liberals and socialists and progressives are actually probably aware what the whole battle is all about. And it's all a huge deception. And there's a lot of it in these books. And I'm going to keep reading this. So maybe we can all see it. So apparently, Lincoln canceled General Grant's order to have all of the Jewish people expelled from the Tennessee Department, which composed of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. However, President Abraham Lincoln directed the revocation of Grant's order. And getting back to where my mind was thinking earlier, Abraham Lincoln was a strange character. Notwithstanding the fact that he was part of the Rosicrucians, another Kabbalistic, theophist, occultic, esoteric order, secret society like the Freemasons, Illuminati, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, and the Zionists, and the Jesuits, and on and on and on. These people who apparently have secret knowledges of reality, the truth behind everything. But anyways, Abraham Lincoln was one of the leaders of the United States of the Rosicrucian Society. So he canceled the order to have the Jewish people expelled from the Tennessee territories. So one wonders what's really going on behind the scenes with the secret societies, like Albert Pike, the general for the war for the South, writing the letter to Mazzini over there in Italy way back then, 1880-something, that the 3 world wars would be required to bring about the New World Order and the New Age. So we keep coming full circle in these conversations. There is a plan, there is a conspiracy, and now that we know it, it's not a conspiracy, it's just a plan we know about, if you want to wake up. The unpleasant episodes of the Civil War years should not obscure the fact that the Jews of the United States were perhaps freer than the Jews had ever been since their dispersion from Palestine. So for thousands of years, since they were dispersed from Palestine, Jerusalem area, they finally made it to the United States. They were freer than anything else, and apparently they were causing problems back then, even when General Grant, Ulysses Grant, during the Civil War. So what were they into? Were they profiteering? Were they manipulating things? Was this war all about a grand theft, taking people's property, this evil thing behind the scenes going on? Moving on, no price had been exacted from the Jews in return for complete political emancipation, and the community flourished economically and religiously. Official and governmental discrimination on the European model was absent, and systematic anti-Semitism did not exist. Beginning in the 1870s, however, almost 1900, anti-Semitism in the form of social discrimination was increasingly evident and was accompanied by the development by ideological anti-Semitism. So that was coming on 1900s. Now I will say before World War I, over in Germany, in my previous video, you can go look it up, and I do have a chart of my videos on my website, rickmiracle.com, so you can go to the front page, and on the left hand side, click that link and you'll see a list of all my videos and the series number, the name of the book and the author, so you can have a little cheat sheet to be able to go back and watch the videos you want, whether it's UFOs or the history of all the authors who wrote about the Jewish problem or question throughout history, stuff I've gone over, or the Freemasons and all the other conspiracy theory authors, famous people who spent 20, 30, 40 years of their lives writing those books. That's why I do book reviews. You know, I want to resurrect those books and say, hey, look, this guy spent his lifetime trying to tell us stuff. And, you know, after the book gets to be popular and then disappears, there's nobody out there to bring it back. So I do my little part with these book reviews. So, development and ideological anti-Semitism. It says here, summer resort advertisements such as, we prefer not to entertain Hebrews. For some reason, the elites back then didn't want the Hebrews going to these elite resorts and elite colleges. So, were common after the 1880s. So closing in on 1900, they had these quite open thing where these elite resorts, maybe upper New York or wherever, and universities preferred not to have the Hebrews there. These people who were growing in number and wealth wanted to get into these elite societies, like in Professor Higger's book that I went over in one of my previous videos, the Jewish Utopia. Whoever these people are, or the construction of their DNA, and not all Jewish people, of course, and very few of them are actually of Hebrew descent, according to my research. A lot of them are from the Khazaria area, the Akhenazis. So, and that comes from the area of Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Mongolia. People with a propensity for a very unusual viciousness in their DNA. So they weren't even Jews. Just, I wonder, and I've been reading some other books on that subject, and I will continue reading them and make videos. But, you know, some people are even theorizing that there has been some influence by some outside aliens in the past who have introduced the alien blood into the human blood to create some kind of hybrid beings, and they do have a propensity for aggression and want to be the elites of the world. Which is in the Bible, by the way. It goes all the way back to Genesis, where the sons of God found the women fair on earth and mated with them, creating an offspring of the divine beings and humans. It's in the Bible, called Nephilim, and they were called giants. And even in the UFO material I've been going over, Bud Hopkins' book just recently, series number 38, where they were abducting women and taking out ovaries and performing operations where they would impregnate the women, later on still stay in contact with the men and women that fathered and sired these children. So is what happened way in the past happening again? Has it been going on all the time? Have there been these people with this hybrid DNA in our world all the time? Is this part of these people who enter our society and viciously go after wealth and power? I'm just asking questions. It can't be a crime to ask questions, but in days like these, truth can be treason. They say you're anti-government, belligerent, or you're insightful, causing people to rise up and maybe attack the government or people, or terrorism. Promises to get a little bit more weirder every day these days. So back then, the resort social discrimination worked back into the cities. Important social clubs such as the Union League Club barred Jewish members way back then in 1877. Jewish members' private schools were closed to Jewish children, and in general, Jews were not welcomed at any institution or association that conferred prestige and status. So this is where one of those situations where I remember reminding ourselves that this was published by the people over there in Israel in 1971. So they would write history the way they want to write history. I've never had an issue with Jewish people in my life. I started studying and collecting old books, and I started to gain a certain view of history of certain peoples, and I really wouldn't want to call them a Jewish history. I'd like to call it a secret society, cult history, and whoever belongs to that appears to be part of the problem. Okay, behind the groundswell of social discrimination lay the profound social changes of the Gilded Age of the late 19th century. So about 1880, 1890, closing in on 1900. The older socially elite groups were faced with a growing struggle for place and power as their security was threatened by rapid industrialization, and the new elements which rose into middle and upper class status appeared as a crass Noviek's riches. So again, remember who published this encyclopedia? This is a Encyclopaedia Judaica. So they will paint the picture the way history's written by the winners, and apparently right now, as Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said years ago, in a heated argument in his Congress, when somebody said we got to stop taking the Palestinians' lands and such, and Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said, "Don't worry about America, we control America." Well, look that up, don't believe me, please. So back then in these ages, there was this striving for social status among certain people, and regrettably, I might want to add this, the sad thing is people like me and so many others, we were raised here in America and Europe and all over the world, and all we wanted to do is get a job and live decently with a little house, a white picket fence, maybe a barbecue grill, a wife, a couple kids. We didn't aspire to be the aristocrats of the world. So we really weren't paying attention, and we didn't think like that. But there were people who did think like that and acted under those goals of theirs to take from us, whether they were Jewish or not, or part of the Illuminati, or traitors to the people who were not Jewish in our society, who become politicians and leaders, and conspire to work against the people for their own political gain and wealth. And obviously some seriously sexual perverted tendencies among these satanic Illuminati types. And I know I keep saying it, but tell me where I'm wrong here. Go watch Gotham, and I had to turn it off the other day, or many of the TV programs. So they were barring the Jews from the social elite groups as they were growing in power and wealth. So it was a problem, and it was documented here. Social discrimination thus served the due purpose of keeping Jews in their place while enhancing and defining the social status of the older elite and the newer non-Jewish wealthy class. It says it right here. I'm not putting the word Jewish in it. It says it here. And I know many Jewish people here in the United States and the world would desire that the Zionist New World Order, New Age people would stop so that they could live a normal life in harmony with the rest of us. And as I was thinking earlier, back in the 1800s and up to World War I, 1913, the Jews were escaping Russia because the Tsar and his leadership, the people in charge of Russia, were having similar difficulties like I'm describing here, and hence they had to put the strong arm on the Jewish people called pogroms, some kind of rules and regulations. So to escape the hardship of the oppression from the Tsar and the people in leadership in Russia and that whole territories, they were going to Germany, who was welcoming them with open arms, and the Jews were prospering immensely. Now think about this. They were being integrated in Germany before World War I, and thought they had found their utopia. But look what happened after. And I say the same thing. The same thing happened 100 years later here in the United States. And look what the stuff that's going on in our political realm now, where the Democratic Party and the Republican Party seem to be playing this dialectric game of keeping two parties opposed to each other and creating this, apparently, Civil War II. Back in the book here, mass immigration in the 1890s and onward during the highly nationalistic 1890s and ideological anti-Semitism began to appear as a byproduct of American naivism, so we're very naive here, and in response to the perceptible cultural gap between the older population and the massive number of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Oh, here we go, Eastern Europe. This place of the Khazars. Non-Hebrew, not real Jews, but their country, their king, hundreds of years ago, adopted the Jewish religion and demanded that everybody in that country become Jewish. And here they were mass immigrating, according to this book, into the United States, causing an increase in anti-Jewish sentiments. So one has to wonder, and according to Henry Ford's book, the things they were doing were not pleasant at all. And they were very aggressive about acquiring businesses, bookstores, theaters, manufacturing, liquor industry, Hollywood and everything. They were quite aggressive and apparently had serious financial resources and secret society support from behind the scenes to help them and assist them in taking over the world, so it seems. Just saying it what it seems like here. It's what it's read here. So, massive numbers of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, page 1650. Men like Henry Adams, representing the Eastern patriot and intellectuals, and Ingelois Donnelly. Ingelois Donnelly, didn't he write the books on Atlantis? Famous senator, representing Western agrarian radicals. While far apart on basic orientation, both viewed the Jews as conniving and grasping, and as the cause and the symbol of their discontent. So, major leaders in our country, major authors and famous people, Henry Adams and Ingelois Donnelly, who wrote the books on Atlantis, senator in the United States, by the way, said part of the problems for these Jewish people was they were conniving and grasping, as I would say. They worked feverishly to take over our stuff, the people, the business owners and things in the United States and the world. But these famous people said here, and as the cause and symbol of their discontent. So by their own particular propensity to want to be conniving and grasping, and their own DNA, their own behavior is causing their own problems and discontent. And of course, not all Jewish people. A lot of Jewish people are opposed to this stuff. If you go on Zionism and Images, you will see Jewish people with banners and books and saying they're opposed to Zionism, and Zionism is not Judaism, and so are they really Jews? And of course, in the Bible, in Revelation 9, it says Jews who call themselves Jews but are not. So is it some kind of alien? I know it's far-fetched here, but hey, it is what it is. I've been going over the books. People have been abducted. There are some hybrid beings apparently being created. In the Bible, it talks about the Watchers and the Nephilim. So are we dealing with something much bigger than we all know about? Could that be the case? All right, moving on. The anti-Jewish stereotype, which emerged clearly during this period, 1890s now, almost 1900. I think when they were starting to invent radio and later on TV and starting to make cars, all this was all brand new. People were traveling by trains. A lot of people had gone west in covered wagons. Gold was discovered there in California in the 1860s. The Civil War had taken place between the North and the South. So I firmly believe that the Civil War and much of these problems were orchestrated by people behind the scenes of the secret societies for world affairs. And I think it's wise for the rest of us to wake up to that fact. And it seems like it's being planned for today. This is January 2017. So you got Ingelois Donnelly and Henry Adams saying they both viewed the Jews as conniving and grasping and as a cause and symbol of dissent. And I almost want to say we probably wouldn't be Jews. It would probably be these Ashkenazi people with a propensity for world domination. Just thinking, I'm not sure. I know what's written here. The anti-Jewish stereotype, which emerged clearly during this period, contained elements of earlier Christian anti-Semitism. So remember, this book is published by the people over there in Israel. And of course, they're now saying it's the Christians who were anti-Semite. And we do know that the Jewish people, not all, but are super anti-Jesus. And of course, in the Bible, Jesus was crucified by the Pharisees, the leaders of the Jewish people of the temple, and Pontius Pilate, the leader of the Roman Empire, who was assigned over there to be in charge of the Jerusalem area. He didn't want to crucify Jesus. He said, I don't want this on my head. I'm not killing the Son of God. And the Jews in the audience screamed and shouted, it's in the Bible, let it be on our heads and our children's heads. So there's something much more going on in the world than most people know about it. A lot of people need to think about it. And again, I keep saying, it's not all Jewish people. Jewish people who've written books have taught me a lot of what I know, that it's not about Jewish people. It's about people in general, whether Jewish or others, who are going towards witchcraft or Satanism or Luciferianism, or people who want to stay with God and the commandments and treat each other how we want to be treated, like what Jesus taught. And it doesn't seem like this battle is over. It seems like it's ready to come to another head of another world war. And this book is really heavy on my arm. Alright, this Shylock image, so here they got this image of Shylocks again. The welding of undue power through manipulation. So these Jewish people back then had undue power through manipulation. Well, what is new about that now? Nothing. Even Tex Mars sent me that pamphlet years ago saying that the CEOs of most of the world's corporations were Jewish CEOs, and I found that hard to believe. I was skeptical. I got a notebook, made a list of the corporations. I showed this in previous videos. I went and looked up the CEOs on Wikipedia elsewhere, and Tex Mars was right. So like I said, these people, the ones who seem to be in power, seem to have a different viewpoint of reality, and they believe you can do anything and deceive and kill and murder for personal power and wealth, and the rest of us are not doing anything to stop them. Alright. Manipulation of gold and the identification of Jews with the hated, feared city. Alright, moving along. In the 3 decades from 1881 to 1910, 3 10-year periods, 80, 90, and 1910, over 1.5 million East European Jews arrived in the United States, and by 1925 there were close to 4 million Jews in the country. So somebody was certainly orchestrating that, and maybe there were other countries all over the world who wanted to expel them and get them out of their territory, so apparently for whatever reasons they were coming to the United States, a land of opportunity. And what has happened since then is these people in power, make no mistake about it, the secret societies, Illuminati, Zionist Jewish folks, had serious hands in the creation and operations of World War I and World War II and 9/11, in my opinion, and all these preparations for World War III and all this progressive, liberal, socialism, disguising communism activities in the United States. They are not done. Their very presence, the competition engendered by their rapid rise in economic status. So these people, whoever they were from Eastern Europe, 1.5 million of them came to the United States, under probably intentional circumstances, and their very rise to power caused agitation here in the United States, and probably some anti-Semitism. Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. Rapid rise in economic status and their presence to achieve social integration lent credence to the anti-Jewism stereotype, sharpened anti-Semitic feelings, and confirmed widespread system of social discrimination. And I was reading in these Encyclopaedia Judaica under socialism, and it did say that the Jewish people had a propensity for socialism and revolutionary activities. So these people like to get involved in that, and on both sides, the Hegelian dialectic, and apparently they can make money. They have leaders on both sides of the fence, but at the very top of the pyramid, we know that they do act in cahoots with each other, much to the disadvantage of the masses of people who are naive and ignorant of this manipulation, causing a lot of economic destruction and suffering to the rest of us. Led by the older German Jewish community, American Jewry formed defense organizations, including the American Jewish Committee in 1906. So back there in 1906, they were forming these organizations to combat the anti-Jewish sentiment because of these apparently behind-the-scenes orchestrated immigration of millions of Jewish people who were economically taking over the country. And the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai Birth in 1913, and the American Jewish Congress of 1920. So here in 1920, they had an American Jewish Congress, and we've gone up, if you've looked on my list of videos, there's plenty of evidence from people who are in the know about the things going on from the Illuminati and the other secret societies and the Zionist Jews, i.e. you can call them communism, and they're disguising and getting a lot of American people involved with these progressive liberal tendencies and propaganda. The citizens don't really know what's really going on. They're being played like they're a fiddle, being played for fools. One of the most serious issues faced by the Jewish community during the first quarter of the 20th century, the 1900s, this would be up to the year 25, was the movement for restriction of immigration to the United States. So even back then, in Henry Ford's time, when he was writing, got the newspaper and was doing his activities, exposing a lot of these goings-on by these European Jewish people, Western Europe Jewish people, Northern Asia, and apparently orchestrated financially effect where they were taking over the industries in the country. Apparently back then there was congressional activity and other movement to restrict the immigration of these people to the United States. Wow, that goes way before my time. It's got nothing to do with me. This is what they were doing then. Although there was, here we go, let's try to switch arms by switching the side of the book here. Alright, here's a document I thought it might be interesting to look at, but this is the headquarters of the 18th Army Corps, Department of Tennessee, December 17, 1862. General Order Number 12. The Jews as a class, violating every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department and also department orders, are hereby expelled from the department. Did you hear what they were accused of? Within 24 hours from the receipt of this order by post commanders, they will see that all of this class of people are furnished with passes and required to leave, and anyone returning after such notification will be arrested and held in confinement until the opportunity occurs of sending them out as prisoners unless furnished with permits from these headquarters. No permits will be given to these people to visit headquarters for the purpose of making personal application of trade permits by order of Major General U.S. Grant, Assistant Adjutant General Joe Rawlings. So here's the order by the U.S. Army expelling all of the Jewish people from the Tennessee Department, which was a good portion of the United States, from Mississippi, Kentucky. Here's a copy of the document. Imagine me when I've read that, huh? Oh my! What are we to think? What are we to think? So no direct anti-Semitism reflected in the legislation resulting from restrictionism. It was clear that the intellectual fathers of the movement, such as Henry Cabot Lodge, Prescott Hall, John Commons, Henry Fairchild, Edward Ross considered Jewish immigration deleterious to the welfare of the nation. Ross, for example, predicted riots and anti-Jewish legislation. If unrestricted immigration continued, Madison Grant, a thoroughgoing racist, condemned the Jews in 1916 in his book, The Passing of the Great Race. So here you go, you got a leader of the United States saying that the continued immigration of these massive amounts of European Jewish people to the United States would be deleterious to the welfare of the nation. So if they think that and say that by the activities that they see going on and the sentiment aroused in the country, then it's obviously called here that he's a thoroughgoing racist. The champion for immigration restriction reached its height after World War I, when the nation reacted with horror at the prospect of unlimited immigration. And let me tell you, after World War I, that's exactly what happened. I've gone over it in previous videos. Remember, before World War I, way back for 40 years, 50 years before World War I in 1913, the Jews were fleeing Russia. And they found safe haven in Germany. So the World War I, apparently, according to what I understand, Germany was rising its industrial base and its influence and power throughout the region in Middle Europe and even Asia. And who was the country that was in that position prior to Germany rising? Of course, that would have been England. Got some guy with a car that sounds like a motorcycle who likes to scream down the street with his engine. But anyways, England, the United Kingdom, the empire where the sun never sets, they controlled most of the world. And who were the advisors and people behind the scenes of the aristocracy even in England at that time? A lot of them were the Kabbalistic, Zionist, secret society Jewish types back then into these kinds of activity. And of course, not all Jewish people. Especially all the ones who were living in Germany who were happy and found their utopia. They were quite upset when the orders came down from the hierarchy of the Jewish leadership that said that they had to turn on Germany because they had made a deal over there in England with something called the Balfour Agreement. And don't believe me, go look it up. That because World War I was because England had to pull Germany down from its position of status in the world. So when England was losing the war, some elite Jewish people got a brainstorm and said, hey, we can help you win the war. We'll give you money. We'll get America to come in the war and fight for you. That's what kind of power they had during World War I in the United States. They controlled Woodrow Wilson. They had already conspired in December 21st, whatever, around then, 1913, to take over our money supply, which had happened before in the United States. And there were several battles where these people were trying to control our money, because if they knew they controlled our money, they knew they controlled our leaders and our country, hence our own economic welfare. Imagine if somebody else controlled your checkbook and had access to your ATM and your password. You'd be a little bit upset. You'd go to the bank and get some money. There wouldn't be any left. Well, when we gave control of our money in 1913, that's exactly what happened. We gave control to these Illuminati, Rothschild, Rockefeller types who were into this Zionist Jewish movement of this new age and new world order. And when we go check our bank account now, it's not only empty, but we've borrowed 17 to 27, 37, probably with interest and all that, 50, 60 trillion dollars. And do you think they're going to forgive us of that debt, these people? You got to know that they have plans of foreclosure on the United States and the world. It's called the New Age and the New World Order. Think of the movie Hunger Games. It's coming. And they're using things like global warming and sustainability and terrorism and everything else to have their way. A lot of propaganda. So here we're reading about Ulysses Grant, the Major General, back then in 1862, expelling these people for their devious activities. And apparently you got these other people. This one guy wrote the book, The Passing of the Great Race, for mongorizing the nation. So they're really raping America back then. Luckily, America was such a wealthy nation. We've made it this far. And we've got so much land and resources. If we can only take it back from these people, we would prosper and we could be good leaders for the world and help people, which is what a lot of people want to do. The campaign for immigration restrictions reached its height after World War I, when the nation reacted with horror at the prospect of unlimited immigration. Well, let me tell you what happened after World War I. They set up all kinds of camps, training camps all over Europe. And they put these Eastern European, Northern Asian Jewish people, if they were Jewish, I don't think they were Jewish by DNA, into these camps and taught them some English and other behavioral techniques, and were mass shipping them into New York and other places in the United States to immigrate here. And they were taking over the cities, the theaters. They were singing songs of victory, and they were ridiculing we the people in the United States. And Henry Ford, the automaker senior, was writing about this, and of course they called him anti-Semite. Anybody who opposes this stuff that they said was going on is an anti-Semite. Burton Hendrick, a well-known journalist, while disclaiming anti-Semitism, wrote a widely publicized attack on Jewish immigration in 1923, Jews in America, as did Kenneth Roberts, a popular novelist. Kenneth Roberts, he's the one who wrote about Henry Gross, the famous dowser, the 3 books I read on dowsing when I was studying that stuff, and holistic healing and psychic research, many years before I come across this conspiracy for a new world order, a plan for a new world order. And apparently involving Christianity and religion and Jesus and God. And apparently involving these gray aliens, reptilians, and watchers and Nephilim, all this stuff from the biblical and historic past. Unbelievable. That's what your mind says to you. Unbelievable. But it is what it is, so it appears. There's something with a higher intelligence operating behind the scenes, manipulating people like a chess game. You know, there's all of us people, we'll call us the white chess pieces, and then there's all these other forces out there. Let's call them the black chess pieces. And our white chess pieces are acting reactionary. We react to what they do. We don't have the intelligence that they have because their actions are premeditated. Like the issues and things they created, false flags, to bring about World War I, World War II, and 9/11 to bring out the invasion of the entire Middle East. And all the other false flags with the terrorism and bombings and shootings. So the people with the black chess pieces are premeditated. They know what they're doing. And we people with the white chess pieces on this world map, we're reacting to their moves. We're in defense positions all the time, scurrying, trying to recover from the attacks they make on us. Repeatedly, hundreds of years, over and over and over. Moving back here, the ultimate result of the restrictionary movement, Immigration Act of 1924. So even by 1924, they finally figured it out and they tried to do something about it. Established a national origins quota system which discriminated heavily against South and East European immigration. Here you go. So back then they made a move, a reactionary movement, the white chess pieces, us, to try to restrict this, but by then I think it had already gone too far. Although anti-Semitism was not the primary motivation for restrictionism, it was a useful propaganda weapon and subtly became enshrined in American legislation for 40 years. So here you go, the people who wrote the Encyclopaedia Judaica, that is their opinion of history. The first-class citizenship of American Jews was indirectly challenged during the 19th and early 20th centuries by the general refusal, get this, of Tsarist Russia to issue visas to American Jews in its mistreatment of those who did receive them. So Tsarist Russia did not want to give visas to American Jews to go to Russia back then in the late 19th century, 1800s, and the early 20th century, 1910, 1920, 1930, World War I, and after World War I was over in 1917, 16. So let's see the sequence of events here. In 1913, December, Christmas time, the American politicians were home on vacation. Christmas. Senator Hyde went to Jekyll Island in Georgia, the United States, and they had a big meeting. And they came up with the agreement to create the Federal Reserve, giving control of the USA money supply to the Rothschilds, Illuminati, Zionism people to create the State of Israel, which was already in play in 1913, by the way, as we've read here in other books. So think about this. So 1913, at the end of the year, weeks away from 1914. They took over the USA money supply, and they had gained control of our president, Woodrow Wilson. Because the prior president would not go along with them for their world plans, the Jews in New York told that president, okay, you won't do what we tell you, the next president will do our bidding, we will put him in office. That would have been Woodrow Wilson. So 6 months later, in 1914, World War I began, or I should say, well, began, but there was manipulation behind the scenes with the Balfour Agreement to secretly get the United States to go assist Britain, the UK, the United Kingdom, the nation, the world kingdom where the sun never sets, in its bid against Germany, who was winning the war, and who had been safe haven to all the Jewish people from Russia and all those territories. And they had to turn traitor on Germany. They learned about this at the trials after World War I, the Versailles hearings. And the people in Germany were stunned to find out all those Jewish people that had found safe haven in Germany had betrayed them, their leadership. And of course the financial debt and restrictions and prosecutions on the German people after World War I was insurmountable, was insane. And it put a lot of economic destruction on the German people. I suppose what's going on in the Middle East right now with all those countries, including Palestine, Syria, which is under relentless assault right now. So there is plans, and they're going on now. These things I'm mentioning here, and mentioned in World War I, World War II, they're going on now. And a lot of people are not the wiser. So the German people had resentment about the World War I, where all these people had turned on them. But apparently, they didn't rise up and start mass slaughtering Jews in their own country. But of course, we know that Britain did not follow through on its commitment to give the Illuminati, the high-level Zionist, Kabbalistic, Zionist Jewish folks, the Palestinians' land, and hence we needed World War II. But let's not forget, back in the 1880s, in the Civil War in the United States, the general for the South, Albert Pike, wrote a letter to his friend Mazzini in Italy, saying it would take 3 world wars to create the New World Order. And remember, Albert Pike and Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley and all these people into the secret societies, cults, and many others were using the satanic rituals, and apparently were in communication with some kind of beings on the other side, giving them advice and direction. This goes all the way back. Even Aleister Crowley was talking to some being that looked like a gray alien called Lamb. Helena Bassett, the Theophist Society, which created the Lucifer magazine, had several masters she was communicating with the witchcraft, Kabbalistic stuff, occult, witchcraft. Albert Pike was getting all that material from the other side. Annie Bassett, Alice Bailey, and even in the books on the Kabbalah, they were communicating with angelic beings. They had an angelology religion, and even demons, a demonology religion. See if I can get back to where I was here. Try to finish up this video. So that's what happened in Russia. The Tsar wasn't issuing permits to American Jews to go there. So we know in 1917, after World War I was about over, they sent some spies or people into Russia, Karl Marx, Stalin, Lenin types, and abducted the Tsarist family and slaughtered them all. I've gone over that in past videos. And you wonder why, and you read about this here. After World War I, the Tsarist Russia wouldn't let the American Jews into Russia. So they had to sneak in there and have him abducted, killed him and his family and his kids. Take over the country in 1917, and for the next 10, 20 years proceeded to kill 25 million admitted by an Israeli newspaper, and by some studies, 100 million non-Jewish people in Russia were slaughtered. And the Christian churches and temples were all destroyed, but not the Jewish temples. It's funny how all this fits together. American Jewry, led by Jacob Schiff and Louis Marshall, these are Illuminati types, of the American Jewish Committee, argued that tacit acceptance of this situation by the U.S. government constituted a slur on its full citizenship. So these people in high places from the Jewish Congress and the Illuminati were coercing our own government to be against Russian Tsarist, the leaders over there, for not accepting the American Jewish people to have visas to go there. In 1913, however, American Jews were shocked when Leo Frank, a factory manager in Atlanta, Georgia, was convicted of slaying one of his female employees. So throughout history, according to Henry Ford and other people, when Jewish people do get caught doing bad things, if you try to prosecute them, you go up against a wall of very powerful people who will bring you down. The 1920s, the emergence of overt anti-Semitism in the Frank case was a harbinger of the upsurge of anti-Jewish feelings, expression, and actions during the 1920s. The hatred against Jews was rooted both in the old stereotypes and renewed economic anti-Semitism, which was an element on the outlook of some of the populace. The movement of protest against capitalism and monopoly, which was powerful in the southern and western states at the turn of the century. Jewish capital was identified with Wall Street. Well, what's new there? And we know they've crashed the system several times. And I know personally lots of people lost a lot of wealth. These people on the inside and a lot of these banksters in Wall Street and these Zionist leaderships have been convicted. They have been caught. There have been studies made that there's just a handful of people who control most of the world corporations and the resources, gold mines, agriculture. They're taking it all away from we the people. Alright, let me see if I can wrap this video up. The hatred against Jews was rooted in both older stereotypes and renewed economic anti-Semitism. This is back in the 1920s, which was an element on the outlook of some of the populists. The movement of protest against capitalism and monopoly, which was powerful in the southern and western states at the turn of the century. Jewish capital was identified with Wall Street and oppression by the financial system of farmers and small businessmen. Well, we know that these big organizations now own a lot of our agricultural lands and are producing foods which are basically toxic to the rest of us, the GMOs, the corns and all that stuff. They're literally poisoning us, these people who own this stuff. And a lot of people know that. They're going to special stores where they can buy non-GMOs and foods with no hormones and all this stuff. It's becoming a big business to try to avoid this toxicity and this poisoning by these people who own this stuff. I'm just reading a tidbit of this history here. Oh my. Didn't start yesterday. Alright, and moving on. Jewish capital was identified with Wall Street. We read that. Some of the then young populists, such as the later Senator Burton Wheeler of Montana, were to remain anti-Jewish on such economic grounds into the 1930s. The artificially stimulation unity, get this, the artificially stimulated unity of World War I cracked under the impact of post-war disillusionment and a sense of imminent danger from internal and external subversive forces. That's going on now. Seized the nation. So prior to World War I, there was anti-Semitism was on the rise. World War I put all that aside. Everybody became patriotic. After World War I, the post-war, what was the words that you used here? Disillusionment and a sense of imminent danger from internal and external subversive forces seized the nation. This would have been even the communist congressional hearings held in the United States, where the communists admitted they were going to infiltrate the churches and take over the country, infiltrate the medical system, the educational system, all this stuff that seems biblical behind the scenes. Destroy Christianity and family decency to bring us this progressive liberalism, and that's really a disguise for Satanism, Luciferianism, so it seems. The old way of life appeared to be disappearing, and under the onslaught of a foreign-born, the city and a new moral relativism and liberal religion. So this was written in 1971, way before me, about the same thing that I'm saying, what the fears were, what I'm saying the purpose was from my research. It's right here in this book, page 1653. The old way of life appeared to be disappearing under the onslaught of the foreign-born, the city, and the new moral relativism and liberal religion. So they wanted everybody to be herded into the cities. They took over all the agricultural farmlands. They caused all kinds of depressions to take away businesses and factories from we secret society, Zionist, Illuminati types. And a lot of us never seen it coming. People don't see it now. Many Americans adopted ideologically stressing cohesive political and religious fundamentalism and sought scapegoats for the ills, real and imaginary, that best beset them. Anti-Semitism was part of this reaction. Okay, so remember, this is published by the people in Israel, the Zionist Jewish folks. So my point that I realized while doing this research was that anti-Semitism was on the rise before World War I, and conveniently, World War I had everybody turn their eyes towards the enemy. That they said that the Germans sunk a ferry over there in Britain and killed some Americans. So here we gullible Americans took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. And after the war, the anti-Semitism started to come back up, and the subversive activities going on inside the nation was recognized. Interesting, the people who controlled our money in 1913, between 1930 and 1939, before World War II, they caused the economic depression in the United States, fleecing and taking everybody's land and properties all over the whole continent. And of course, all that was diverted in those angers, because then they said that something bad happened over in Europe and we had to go into World War II. So now they're saying that Putin, Russia is the enemy. 9/11, they said all the Arabs were the enemy. At one time they were saying Chavez, Venezuelan leader, was the enemy. And Cuba, the guy there, was the enemy. Mexico was sometimes the enemy. So whoever is ruling our world is using this Hegelian dialectic, this opposing forces thing, to keep the two groups of people fighting each other while these puppet masters are controlling the whole show. And who are the puppet masters? Are we reading about them? Do sometimes people wake up and realize who's doing it, and then they cause some kind of false flag event to get everybody distracted and looking a different way? And do people fall for it time again and time again? Moving on here. It says here, American anti-Semitism was part of this reaction. According, this is created by the people in Israel. So we know this is their point of view. Can't be anybody else but us. They're the good guys. They've done everything, and we deserve to get on our knees and thank them for all the wonderful things they've done in the world. And not all Jewish people, of course. And are these people behind the scenes being controlled by some alien entity, some other people with a stranger DNA? Some people who know a lot about history and ancient technologies. Have these intelligent organizations and cultures, have they just been in hiding? Have they been in the inner earth? Have they been underground? Have they been off planet? I don't know. But apparently there are some intelligence operating behind the scenes. Foreign radicalism, often associated with Jews, and I did read the Encyclopaedia Judaica on socialism, and I will be going over that, but it did say the Jewish people had a propensity or a personal interest in getting involved in socialism and revolutions, and that was involved over there in the French Revolution, German revolutions, all kinds of revolutions, and causing these things in all these countries. They like being part of that stuff. The rest of us are trying to go about our business and our daily life. We never see it coming. We don't know who's orchestrating these people down on your city street, protesting this and protesting that, and the gay rights movement, and United, the medical insurance or medical care for all right now. In January 2017, they're protesting here in my city. And I wanted to walk over and go, who sent you guys down here to do this protesting? Who's paying you? And, some of the people are innocent. They don't know who's really creating all this behind the scenes. And Joe Biden over there in Switzerland saying that Putin and Trump and all the other people who want decency and family values are against progressivism and liberalism, and we're the enemy for opposing what they're trying to do to the world, which is they're just horrible events after horrible events for hundreds of years. I'm reading here, economic collapse all the time. Foreign radicalism, often associated with Jews, became the chief target of the post-war Red Scare in 1919 and 1920s. This alleged Jewish Bolshevik nexus remained a paramount part of the anti-Semitic propaganda. So what people realized when they sent the people over there to abduct the Tsar, kill his family, remember, as we just read here, earlier than his abduction and murder in his whole family and the takeover of Russia, using even military troops to secure that nation, by the way, unbeknownst to the American people, protecting train stations and such like that. So the Tsarist Russia weren't giving visas for American Jews to go to Russia. So then the next thing you see by these world controllers, the Tsar and his family was abducted and murdered. The country taken over, and maybe up to 100 million non-Jewish people were slaughtered, largely through starvation. There's more going on here in the world than people know, I keep saying. All right. The concern of the Jews over these charges was heightened considerably by the appearance of an American edition of the spurious Protocols of the Elders of Zion in 1920, followed by a work based on it, The Cause of World Unrest. So many Jews who have written books says that the Protocols of Zion are true and real. And of course this Encyclopaedia, Judaica Encyclopaedia, published in 1971, says that it's spurious Protocols of the Elders followed. So they're saying it's false. And the basic message of these volumes was that the Bolshevik Revolution was Jewish in origin and part of the international Jewish conspiracy to destroy Christendom and dominate the world. This is back in the 1920s. And I think if anybody were to pay attention today and see what's going on, they can see that the Protocols of Zion, the document for taking over the world and what they plan to do to us, is well underway. I mean, even the 1920s congressional hearings, these communists testified, and the communists, of course, were created by these Bolshevik Jewish people, these people into the Kabbalah, these people into Zionism, ruling the world from Zion. They are, it says right here, just read it, they apparently are anti-Christendom. They, as we know, biblically speaking, 2,000 years ago, Jesus was crucified. And they denied him as the Savior. He was only teaching, treat others how you want to be treated. And they are these Freemasons, Rosicrucian, Zionism, are waiting on a new Messiah. And of course, we all that know prophecy in the Bible, we know it is the Antichrist. So they're Masonic. They're waiting on this, what they want to say is the real Messiah to come, who's going to lead them into world victory to dominate the world. That's what their Messiah is going to do. The Messiah that came, Jesus, wanted everybody to treat each other equally and fairly and love each other. So for me, it's not rocket science which side to choose. I don't want to dominate everybody and be a vicious person taking over the world and everybody at my feet and be my slave. But apparently there are people that do. And so I think it's important that we people who are not that kind of nature, it's not our DNA, it's not our desire, and we believe in the teaching that Jesus taught and other good people. Remember, Jesus told some Jewish people way back then, "Ye are the killers of your prophets." So even Jesus says God, the spirit world, had sent other people trying to deliver a message to you to how to behave. This is not nothing new. Throughout history, these spiritual entities have interacted with this world, notwithstanding the fact that I and everybody else are spiritual beings in these biological bodies. So we do have opposition. Apparently there are some entities in this spiritual world, this realm, and I'm going to go over more of those kinds of material. I've been going over tons of it. It does exist, and even in that world, that cosmic world, the spiritual realms, there have been spiritual battles by angelic beings, demonic beings who rebelled and didn't want to go by the rules and wanted to be aristocratic, wanted to be the leaders, didn't want to just be a citizen. I guess nothing changes, whether it's on earth or up in heaven or down below or the other spheres or the other dimensions or the other firmaments. Now, what are these beings? I've got some interesting books I'm going to go over and talk about that. So thank you for watching my video. I hope you found this interesting. I will continue reading. I have a lot more that I highlighted on this anti-Semitism in America out of the Encyclopaedia Judaica. Miracle reporting.